It's Thursday, November 7, 2024 at 8:30 a.m. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Administration and Projects Committee. I would first like to call everyone's attention to the short video.
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. All right, Emily, if you'd be kind enough to conduct the roll call.
Commissioner Arnerich?
Here.
Commissioner Fideli?
Here.
Vice Chair Noack?
Here.
Chair Sauce?
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum with Commissioner Hernandez-Thorpe absent.
All right, next on the agenda is public comment. This is the opportunity for members of the public, whether in person or by teleconference, have an opportunity to address the committee on items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? Seeing none. Emily, anybody online?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Then I will close public comment. Next, we move to the consent calendar. Would any committee member like to pull an item?
I'd just like to make a comment, if I could.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd actually mentioned it to Brian. I saw we had an internal audit. What it made me think of is that 8 years ago, our bonds, all that we had sold, all had clawback provisions. So when the corporate tax rate goes down, our rates went up within that bond. And it was over $1 million it cost us for that. And that's how they're built. And so the question to Brian, given that while we're going out in February to refinance, is just what are the impacts of anything that we will remain holding, just so we know what that cost is. And how does that now impact what our bond rates are going to be? So just something for the future. So appreciate that.
Thank you for that.
And with that, I would move the consent items.
Okay, do we have any, we have a motion from Newell? Second from Sue. Any public comment on the consent calendar?
We have not received any public comments.
Okay, I don't see any raised hands here. Emily, do we need a roll call vote on this?
We do.
Okay.
Commissioner Arnerich?
Yes.
Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Noack?
Yes.
Chair Sauce?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, so we will now move to the regular agenda items. The first item is the legislative update. Lindy, good morning. Are you going to tee this one off for us?
I am. Thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to introduce Mark Watts, who is here to provide us our state legislative update. Thank you, Mark.
Good to see you, Mark. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I don't have as an exhaustive report as I usually do. November was pretty notable for activities working with the administration once all the bills have been signed and approved or vetoed the month before. So I thought I'd start off just a real short note on the statewide ballot measures that were on the ballot this week. There's two I want to draw your attention to, and there's three, I guess, I want to talk about. The first two is Prop 2 and Prop 4. Those were bonds, and they were $10 billion each. One was for education facilities, and the other was for a mix of environmental facilities, wildfire prevention, water, clean water, and the like. And it showed a willingness by the voters to continue spending on items that they like and approve of. Interestingly, by contrast, the long, much awaited ACA 1, which became Prop 5, which was the effort to reduce the ballot threshold to 55%. At one point, it had transportation infrastructure in it, as well as affordable housing. That got taken out, as I reported on a month or so ago, and that one failed by about 6%. So I think the tax fatigue is out there in spite of support for new bond programs. So I thought those were notable to look at. You're more expert on your local members, so you know who won and who didn't. But I would just draw two, maybe three names out to talk about. First, Assemblymember Wilson. She's the chair of transportation, so from a statewide perspective, she's vital of interest to a lot of folks in a lot of constituencies, but she's also one of your hometown people, so that's a good note. She's very welcoming, her and her staff, when we visited in Sacramento, and I'm just pleased to see that she's back. Mr. Cortese, who's not local, but he's from the Bay Area, he's from San Jose, was successful in returning, and he's the chair currently of Senate Trans. There's been some rumbling little birds on the windowsill saying he may look for a different post as opposed to transportation, but with a history of that particular district with previous Senator Bell and then Senator Cortese chairing that committee, we're hoping he stays in place. He's really good to work with. Interestingly enough, Josh Newman, if you remember Josh Newman, it was one of the critical votes back on SB 1 in 2017, and then was quickly recalled. He was represented Split County, partially LA, partially Orange County, and the recall was, back then, was successful. He's since been elected, and he was running for re-election this time around, and it looks like the numbers aren't finalized, so it's hard to say exactly what I was going to say, but I think he looks like he's lost his seat this time around. And if you look into the neighboring county, Riverside County, there are a couple really, really tough fights going on between, well, obviously between the parties, in both houses. The Senate has a challenger from Palm Springs trying to get the seat that Ms. Rosili Bo had, and there's another seat that is in the Assembly that's in contention. As a result, it's hard to say how the supermajority numbers roll out. We'll have to wait probably till later this week, early next week, and get a better handle on how those all roll out. So that's my commentary on the elections from a transportation and local perspective. When I alluded to the fact that a lot of work going on with the administration, they have had underway a revision to the climate action plan that they developed way 2019, 2020. It's being updated. It's coming to the commission in November. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, that's today. I thought it was the 17th, it's the 7th. So they'll be adopting the updated they call it CAPTI Climate Action Plan. A couple of things that they're going to do in it that's of real importance to, I think, to staff and planning purposes, is they're updating the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, which was a key program developed under SB 1, to indicate that the guidelines will, from here on, if this is adopted, state that goods moving projects will have to show how they mitigate passenger VMT impacts in order to qualify. So that's going to be up front. The Solution for Congested Corridors program is one that this organization is very familiar with. And it'll deal also as well with VMT neutrality in order to compete in the system. So the kind of rigorous demands placed on project proponents. There's also guidance for VMT analysis in rural areas. They've been having real difficulty trying to get a program that mitigates the VMT in the rural areas. So this is going to be leading to harder and more firm analysis for the rural areas so they can get some projects out there. So that's the climate action plan that the Secretary's office has been working on. They also have been reviewing and made several grant awards. They awarded the Active Transportation Grant Program. There are 277 projects totaling over $2.5 billion for this cycle. And that's about 15 times the amount. The last couple of years, we've been fortunate by the fact that the budget included a significant increase in funding from the general fund. And then that was narrowed down this last budget cycle to $400 million being put into play each cycle at $100 million each over the next 4 years. So even though it's going to be a smaller amount, it's still being supplemented compared to what the basic program would have. The State Transportation Commission will adopt the final grant awards at its December meeting, and that's usually in Riverside. They also conducted the 6th of the Transit Transformation Task Force meetings, and I'm one of the only members. I'm the only member on there who's not affiliated with a transit agency specifically or a transit advocacy group. I'm just blessed to have the opportunity, and I guess the chair, the secretary liked me, but these meetings are very intense, and we don't get to see the agenda until maybe 2 days before the meeting. This last time, they focused on a couple items that are meant to be beneficial for public transit, and that is some changes to land use and some housing policies that they will want to put into more refined format before they get a vote on it. Looking for how transit, TOD, and value capture of properties near transit stations can be best defined so that they can have that program be something that they put forward in 2025. And they also began a series of conversations about first and last mile access to transit. So we've got some really good experts on that on the task force, and I think they're going to come up with some good programs. The next meeting in December is going to see the beginning of a discussion for new funding. And so I think that's going to be one that's going to be well attended, and I'm waiting to see the agenda so we know what we're going to talk about. I'm going to go in and see the secretary or undersecretary next week to kind of walk through some thoughts I have about transit funding. So I may have some, maybe reaching out for help from management staff here afterwards. So those are the items I thought would be best to highlight today. When the legislature comes back for its formation date in the early December, there are sometimes bills introduced on that first day, but typically the wave of bills would be more in January. So I think the next several meetings, when I come here, I'll be giving you more in-depth briefing on actual legislative items. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark, very much. Any questions from committee members? Paul?
So you said that Lori Wilson did finally win?
That's where she's leading right now.
Leading,
So,
okay,
yeah,
because
so
I
that-
just saw behind.
Right.
So she's ahead now.
As according to the material on Secretary of State
Okay.
this morning.
Thank you.
Sue?
I had a question. Is there discussion, when you talk about TOD and first and last mile, is there discussion with working with the housing side on the RENA requirements that made a lot of people put housing away from transit rather than close to transit?
Right.
Is there any coordination, hopefully, for going forward that some of those policies get impacted by those discussions?
There has been discussion briefly when this topic was introduced, but they also have a working group behind the scene that's going to prepare the agenda, and I expect that to show up at that point in time. There's some interesting ideas that they're floating. I don't know. It's not specific to your question, so I won't go any further, but there are some interesting things being developed.
Yeah, Mark, I am glad to hear that there is discussion of linkage between land use and transportation planning on the one hand and focus on first and last miles. I know for a lot of our communities, those are two very important issues, so please keep us posted.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mark. Any public comment on this piece of this item?
We have not received any public comments.
Okay, so next up is Gus. Is he in the ether? There he is. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I had a little bit of technical difficulty getting into the meeting this morning, but good to be here and see everyone. As y'all can probably imagine, there's not been too much news out of DC this week. We're expecting some changes with the political appointees at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Now, with a change in administration, former President Trump will be taking back over there. If past is prologue, based on that, I expect we could see a pause on the pending grants, as well as pending regulations and NPRMs, or rulemakings as they're called, once he's inaugurated. That'll then give him time to get his cabinet into place and his own political appointees into the agency. There's nothing specific at this moment, but just given some of the politics between the personalities here, I would imagine there could be some initial executive orders and some that may aim at CARB and some activities that California leads on. We'll be monitoring, as the transition team moves policies and people into place over the next couple of months, and be working with the staff on anything of relevance here. The House of Representatives is actually still officially TBD on who will be in control. I believe the Republicans feel very good, based on other results from Tuesday, that they will likely keep the majority. But there are some seats in California, other Western states like Alaska, that still have some outstanding ballots. So we don't have final numbers yet. We expect of our local delegation, Congressman DeSaulnier and Garamendi, should keep their seniority spots on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. That will, of course, be important because this upcoming Congress will have to consider reauthorizing the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act programs. In the scenario we're looking at, with a potential full Republican control House and Senate with a Republican president, I would say it's very unlikely to see the dollar amounts that we had in the IIJA. But the first issue of this new Congress is likely to be tax reform. Many of President Trump's prior tax package will be expiring in 2025. So the Congress is expected to focus on that first and foremost in the first 100 days. They'll spend a lot of political capital on that, I would imagine. But on a separate track, the committees of jurisdiction, Senate Commerce, House Transportation and Infrastructure, will also be working on their reauthorization proposals for surface transportation policy and grants. That the IIJA may get extended, but we'll of course have a lot of opportunities to propose changes through our representatives as the committees of jurisdiction kind of begin their drafting process over the 2025 year. The Senate has also flipped to a Republican majority. Just of note there for our delegation, Senator Padilla does serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee that has jurisdiction over federal highways, policy, and funding. And Senator Butler has previously been on the Senate Banking Committee. That committee, due to a number of effects from the elections this week, will have a couple of openings on the Democrat side. So the new California senator may sit on the banking committee. Things are not set in stone yet, as Congress and the new members have not gotten into town to sort out how they'll organize themselves. But banking has jurisdiction over transit policy. So a lot of our representatives and senators are going to be, in the middle of the action committee-wise in drafting the next surface transportation policy bill. That's the lay of the land for now. If there are any other questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But we're still, like I say, waiting to see final numbers for House control. And of course, the Senate has to organize itself with current Republican leader Mitch McConnell is going to be stepping down from that leadership role. And the Republicans will have to organize a new leadership structure in that chamber too.
Thank you, Gus. Good luck, and
We're not,
yeah, right. We
we're
don't
not-
have a lot to say. Do we have any questions?
I just got one.
Yes.
One thing. So given the change in leadership and the administration, just want to give this committee a heads up that staff is going to be considering to bring the mega grant agreement directly to the board in November. We need to execute that agreement as soon as possible. And so we are expediting that internally. We plan to bring it directly to the board probably as a draft, and basically give the executive director authorization to execute it, and including any amendments, so we can work with Federal Highways and get that executed as soon as possible before the end of the year.
Wise move.
So.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And if there's anything else that should be fast-tracked, please bring it to us forthwith. Any other questions or comments? Gus, thank you very much for the update, and we'll see you next time. All right. Any public comment on this item?
We have not received any public
And I
comments.
don't see any raised hands, so I'll close public comment, and we'll next move to the next item, which is an action item. And we will have a presentation on establishing the Gomentum Innovation Alliance, including a statewide advisory board and a regional workforce council. Lindy, welcome.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sauce, and I am proud to be here to present this. It's been a labor of love. You've probably heard about this over the last year or so in concept, but I'm quite excited to be here to present, thank you, to present the proposal for the Gomentum Innovation Alliance. Hold on one sec. Do it that way. So the Gomentum Innovation Alliance will foster collaboration amongst public, private, and academic sectors, driving workforce development in the transportation and mobility industry. So the concept for this Innovation Alliance is that it would have two groups. One would be the statewide advisory board, and the second would be the regional workforce task force. The task force would meet much more often. The idea is that it would likely meet monthly and that it would be comprised of organizations here, generally in Contra Costa, or that have a presence in the Bay Area and are part of or working on these issues, whether that be workforce development in general or specifically looking at transportation and mobility. That regional workforce group would be thinking about what is most operational or what we could do as action items to really increase training and workforce opportunities in Contra Costa County. And they would be looking to the statewide advisory board to think about policy, funding opportunities, and to help to direct them as it relates to kind of statewide initiatives under the workforce umbrella. I will go through in a further slide kind of exactly what the makeup could look like of those. But I think it's important to note that the statewide advisory board will hopefully be folks with a lot of experience and knowledge in statewide policy, likely coming most of the time from statewide organizations, and that they would only meet twice a year. So it would not be a large commitment, but it would be an ask that we have a lot of real experts in the room to help to kind of drive the work of the Regional Workforce Task Force and help to identify what of the work of the Regional Workforce Task Force is scalable statewide and how the state might be open to or able to support that work. A lot of what we hope to learn through this process is about what kind of programs are most needed and how we can best launch those throughout the state with a starting ground or a pilot ground here in Contra Costa County. And you can see at the bottom of these slides what some of those programs could potentially be and kind of the sectors that we'll be looking at, including automation, connectivity, electrification, digitalization, and systems, so sort of system-wide approaches. I think it's important to sort of understand that these organizations will all work together, that the Gomentum Innovation Alliance will kind of sit as the top umbrella, and that under it will leave this Regional Workforce Council or statewide advisory board. And in all of that, you can kind of see the effort is around creating this mobility technology workforce and really fostering that. So they are not completely separate entities. Instead, they are entities sort of all feeding and working together. And just to sort of clarify, that Gomentum Innovation Alliance would really be sort of the consulting and facilitating staff helping to lead these groups and ensuring the sort of connection between the two. It is not an entity in itself. So just for clarity, when we talk about mobility, we're really talking about the movement of both people and goods. And we thought this graphic was a helpful way to think about the different sort of careers and workforce development efforts that could play into this. We're not necessarily just talking about an autonomous vehicle or autonomous shuttle, but also the movement of goods. As you can see, there's something on water there, there's things in the air. There's a lot of opportunity in this space, and we're definitely trying to ensure that we're taking a very broad view of what kind of workforce development programs could be most beneficial here in the region and statewide. And just as a little bit of background, the Gomentum Innovation Alliance was really born in part by the veto letter of Governor Newsom through AB 361, in which he said we need workforce development in this space and really kind of tasked the state to look at that. And while I know they have taken that effort up in small ways and really had a lot of internal conversations, we as an agency did not see anyone kind of coming to the table to bring folks together and to build a bigger table, to kind of lean in on that terminology. And so we thought that it would be smart to take it upon ourselves to be part of that conversation and see it happening right here in a county in which we are already leading in this space. We've gotten a lot of support for that. And when we've talked about forming this, there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, including from the state. But we certainly hope that the state having an active role might also lead to them continually being more and more involved, as they have already kind of been tasked with taking on some of this work. So here's a little bit of a preview of the governance structures themselves. So you can see with this statewide group, we're talking about a statewide labor representative, someone who could represent kind of our university system, likely someone who has a transportation program, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, Irvine, someone who could represent the statewide community college perspective, someone who looks at statewide disability rights, someone from private sector engineering and tech, and then someone who can talk to us about public transit, but again, from the statewide perspective. And then you see at the bottom of this are sort of these core members, which includes a representative who can speak to federal funding and policy, potentially someone who works in the economic development and workforce development space federally, CCTA, and then California. And we've already talked pretty closely with GoBiz, the economic development kind of wing of the governor's office, as well as the California Workforce Development Board, and they've identified who would sit on this or proposed who might sit on it from the states and under the governor's office. And then the Regional Workforce Council has a lot of similarity, but we're more looking for folks who would be regional representatives. And this would also include a representative who could speak to the cities. Potentially that would be something we might look to the Council of Mayors, for example, to recommend someone. We have not made any recommendations, nor do we have any recommendations for you of names or exact folks who would sit on this, more a general structure. And what we are asking you to approve today is the ability for us to establish this. We are not looking for approval on exactly who the membership would be. Just going to let this sit for 1 second because I know there's a lot of detail on this slide. So you've seen this slide before, but I thought it would be helpful to revisit as we sort of talk about what this Gomentum Innovation Alliance would be working on. This is a graphic that sort of talks about the pathways, and as Tim often says, we've already done a lot of this work, right? We already are in the space of developing STEM programs and looking at K through 12 education. We already do field trips, and we have a student competition that is part of the Redefining Mobility Summit. So some of this work would just be about heightening this and really kind of creating more connection, building out a pathway that's sort of clear, that talks to how we kind of foster, I guess I will say, explore programs and experience programs, and then building out this sort of excel and evolve program. And so in the next few slides, I'll kind of talk to what that might look like operationally. So for that explore and experience, again, we've already done some of this work, and we're definitely interested in asking the Gomentum Innovation Alliance to help us think about what this could look like in a more robust program. But some ideas that I've sort of put forward here is that it could include interactive experiences. So we've talked about potentially building out a learning space at the current Gomentum station where students can come in and use things like VR and kind of touch the machines that are used in the automation and automotive industry. Increasing access, so really thinking about partnering with youth centers that are already in existence here in Contra Costa County, concentrating on kind of building out partnerships in the community with kind of entities that already exist, and then targeting outreach and offerings to equity priority communities. STEM summer academies, so again, being able to use the current Gomentum station as a learning space and bringing in students over the summer to learn from experts in the field and kind of have hands-on experiences, and also hopefully some mentorship, right? Some of the folks who already work at Gomentum can come out and speak and kind of hopefully provide some inspiration to students. And then lastly, school partnerships, really strengthening our relationship with schools so that we are able to bring more students in to do field trips and learn about these technologies and these industries kind of firsthand. A lot of what we're hoping that the Gomentum Innovation Alliance will do is really work on this evolve piece. So thinking about upskilling and reskilling, micro-credentialing, trying to really think about where this industry can go and how we could really transition those who might be interested in transitioning into these fields as they continue to develop. So part of that is establishing the Innovation Alliance itself. Another part is conducting the gaps and needs analysis, which CCTA has already undertaken, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in future slides. But this gaps and needs analysis will really help us to identify those future workforce opportunities. Next, we hope the Innovation Alliance will help to think about program development. Now that we have a sense of these gaps and needs, what programs could be developed or should be developed here, and how exactly would we deploy those? Are they micro-credentialing non-credit programs through community college? Are they extensions of engineering programs that already exist through our CSUs? Are they a partnership with adult ed? Right, there's many different opportunities to kind of explore, and the idea is that this workforce group would be able to do so. And then eventually piloting, right? Supporting pilot programs that increase opportunity and training to Contra Costa residents. So talking a little bit about the gaps and needs approach, because this is going to be very instrumental in helping us identify kind of future program development and providing a lot of information to the Gomentum Innovation Alliance, both at the state and at the regional level. We're aiming to get about 60 to 100 participants, and actually I want to just quickly introduce Danielle Elkins, who's here in the audience and has been working very directly on this with a group called the Plum Catalyst. And we're also going to be targeting both sectors and roles. So a lot of the questions that we'll be asking will be about folks' experience within the professional role that they hold, but we'll also be asking about their kind of sector experience, right? What are they seeing within their industry? I'll give you a little bit of a sample of what kinds of questions we'll be asking in a future slide. So here's a little bit about the process when it comes to the gaps and needs approach. Obviously the objectives, what is that process going to look like? So there'll be data collection, then an analysis and insights, and then we will receive a strategic recommendations document. And that's likely going to be a big part of what we use to kind of move into program development. And the outcomes are hopefully that it helps us to create key workforce development programs and informs what those programs could be and sort of what we might need to do to get to program development. Here's a little bit of a sample, as advertised, of what kind of questions might be asked of the folks who are going to participate in this gaps and needs assessment, including asking about training methods. But a lot of these questions come to what kind of skills or skill gaps are you seeing? What are you excited about when you see it on a resume? What do you feel like you're not seeing enough of? And where do you imagine your industry will be hiring in 3 to 5 years? So we're not trying to ask folks to project out 20 years in the future. We're trying to stay pretty current, recognizing this technology is ever changing and very present. And then we're also going to be asking questions about funding mechanisms for education and training, right? Certainly it feels important that we think about and identify if folks are already spending a lot of their dollars on these sorts of projects, how do we bring that effort together so that we, again, are all sitting together at one table and hopefully creating really robust programs instead of tons of small little programs that serve 100 students when we could create something scalable that could serve thousands of students or learners, since some of them may not be what you traditionally think of as a student. So that is a quick overview of the Gomentum Innovation Alliance. I am asking for y'all's approval of a resolution that would establish the Gomentum Innovation Alliance, and I'm opening it up for discussion and questions.
Thank you very much, Lindy, for that very thoughtful presentation. Any questions from committee members? Sue? Oh, is your green light on?
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, yeah, small hiccups this morning. Love the idea. I think this is really a great concept. My underlying question has to sort of be, how does it get funded?
Yeah,
You knew that was coming
absolutely.
from me, right? I mean, it's my job.
No, I told Tim yesterday that was my.
Sorry.
So this is the reason that there's no fiscal implication is this has already been funded through the dollars that are coming in through Gomentum. So I think it's exciting to hopefully be able to go out into the community and say that the dollars that are coming to CCTA from Gomentum will be used in a way that, has benefit to the community in the region.
That's that 10% or $500,000
Exactly.
number?
Yes.
Presumably, we get our loan paid back first?
Parallel.
Sorry, it's the number thing.
Parallel.
Okay, that's it.
And just maybe to add on, specifically on the youth programs, like there's an opportunity to leverage the revenues from the Redefining Mobility Summit. So we have built up a pretty good nest egg of funding with Bay Area leads that will be specifically directed to the STEM and youth programs. So for example, like the summer camp, the youth camp that Lindy's planning for next summer, it would come directly out of those funds. And so I think we have two pots of funding in terms of, the 500K and then also, or the 10%. And then also, and just so you know, I mean, to answer your question, Commissioner Nowak, I mean, NextGen is definitely on the hook to fund both, right? The loan payments as well as the 500K, and we're gonna still hold them to that commitment, in terms of funding both of those.
So she stole my question, but I have some follow-ups, Lindy. So to put it different, is my mic on? So the funding both in the short term and the long term is going to come from sources other than Measure J?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, but I just wanted to confirm that. And what about staff time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I have built some of my staff time for this towards the funds that we have coming out of Gomentum, so that $500,000 pot. But most of this is being handled, other than some strategic involvement from my end and Tim's end, from the consultant who is being paid from that $500,000 bucket.
Okay.
So all of the staff time it's relatively small, to be honest. They've been great partners in helping us put together. It's mostly just been strategic direction from us. And then there is certainly an element of connection, right, that we have with state agencies and meeting with them, but those are meetings that we're already having, and we're just having the opportunity to sort of involve, hey, well, by the way, we're also doing this thing on the side.
But I imagine that at the front end, right, there's going to be a lot of herding of cats as the alliance is established. Who's doing that?
The consultant.
Okay.
Yeah, we have tasked them with that. We did provide lists of folks and, have done a little bit of weeding through some recommendations, but for the most part, all of the outreach and the herding of cats is part of the consultant contract.
Okay. So also funded out of the proceeds from the test facility. And then just one more question. What do we foresee labor's role being in this?
Yeah, so I'll let Tim talk a little bit to some of the conversations he's had directly with them, but we think that they're a critical partner. I don't think that this would be successful if they weren't at the table, and the hope is that they will be both at the regional table and the statewide table. At the regional table, providing insights. For example, we might have ATUs who are already involved in our May Mobility project, come in to talk to us about what they would like to see next steps look like in that. And, you know, we might also have other unions who are willing to partake, but I do think that part of it will be about figuring out what we need from a program development standpoint, right? What are some of those programs that we're looking at, and bringing in strategic partners along the way at a regional standpoint. Statewide, it'll be important that we have a statewide leader who can, again, just sort of speak to what they're looking at strategy and policy-wise. And that person, I would imagine, would stay consistent.
All right, any other questions? Newell?
Actually, I didn't have any questions, I had comments.
Oh, just questions. Paul?
Thank you. Yeah, I have similar questions to the funding and the staffing time, because just looking at the PowerPoint number 10, there's a lot of stuff on there to do, a lot of stuff that are open-ended goals. But I think generally these are worthy goals for this agency to be doing. But I wanted to focus my attention on the advisory board, the state advisory board, because I do have questions about a county's goal of establishing a state board. And is it our role to do that? And what does that mean? I mean, there's lots of questions about, will it take legislation? What legislative person will carry this for us? If it does, what are the costs? How do you choose these advisory members? Which could take up a lot of staff time, which I was concerned about. So that's the one thing. It's kind of the odd duck out that, has this been done before? Do we know that a state board has been created by a county entity or a state entity? And do we have a state contact in the legislature to help us, or is it a governor's appointment that's going to be happening?
It's a great question about whether or not there's a model that we could look at. And actually, I'll take that back to our consultant and we'll look deeper at that. It's been slightly floated and we haven't identified a great one, but I do know that there have been other statewide boards, not so much. I don't have as much knowledge about whether one has been set up by the county. In regards to legislation, though, we are calling this a statewide board because we're asking for folks who have statewide perspective and are coming from a statewide perspective. It will not be an act of the legislator, nor will it be owned by the state, at least right now. Though certainly we are very open to that, should the state be willing to take that on. And yes, the state will be represented by a governor's appointee, but not appointee like an official one. It'll just be someone who's coming from his office.
And my concern about, is that our role is that, does this lead us down a path that sucks up a lot of time when we have so much other stuff to do here at CCTA? So my bottom line is, in the resolution, this vote today is for us to allow you to proceed in this direction. My concern is we don't know what you're going to come up with as a final solution of what the role will be of this statewide advisory board. The other stuff I don't have a problem with. My concern is that I hope there's a commitment, whether it's in the resolution or not, that the full board will look at what is finally presented to us, not just to let you go do it, but what is it that you're giving us that we will approve, that this board will actually look at that and say, this is fine, let's do it. Is that commitment there? I'd love words in the resolution to say we will also approve this as a full board.
Yeah, we can bring it back to the board. I think one of the things we can do, I mean, we don't want to do this in a vacuum, right? We want to make sure that the board continually stays engaged with the process, and we'll provide regular updates in terms of what we're doing. I think this is just the first step, and maybe in the presentation of the board, we can outline more of just a schedule in terms of like what next steps we're going to be taking. But I think in general, I think in terms of like the names and everything and the actual structure, the statewide advisory board, we're not asking the state to create anything. I think that's also one important thing. We're not asking the state. It's really.
But right now, this board doesn't know what you're asking.
Yeah. So we can clarify that. Yeah, we can clarify that. And so we're not asking the state to create an actual state board. You know, what we're doing is.
We're not.
Yeah, it's
Well, statewide
what
means.
What it is it's essentially
doing it?
it's essentially a statewide advisory group to the regional working group.
Created by this county.
It's created by
Well, not the county, by us. We're not
by
county.
CCTA. Yeah, but I would say, and the reason why we need to do that is because when we have this this local, and talking more about like maybe the mechanics of this a little bit more is, you know, we're gonna have this regional working group, that'll have like Contra Costa Workforce Development Board, local Contra Costa community colleges, local labor chapters, right? And so, it'll have local private sector members, you know, maybe from Gomentum Station or outside of Gomentum Station. And so what we wanted to do, knowing that there is this AB 361, you know, initiative that was kind of directed by the governor, we didn't want this regional work effort like just to happen like in another vacuum, you know, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we're doing here locally within the county is at least done in a way that is being connected with what's happening, you know, in the state. So for example, there are a couple things that could happen. One is, you know, the governor could see value in the work that we're doing and actually adopt this work in the Labor Council, you know, and that's one thing that we've talked about with GoBiz. Another option would be that there, within the state secretary of Transportation's office, there's actually an AV task force that was created a while back, and it kind of fizzled out. And so we were talking actually with the governor's office on Tuesday about maybe rekindling, you know, that task force and what we can do to maybe reshape that potentially. But in the meantime, we didn't want to really have, you know, this loss of connection with the state or with the governor's side or Sacramento basically on this work effort. And so because we have so much enthusiasm and so much interest in this regional working group, like people like GoBiz, the California Workforce Development Board, even the governor's office, and even the secretary's office are like, hey, we want to be involved. We want to learn more about what you're doing. You know, we don't want, and mainly because they see such alignment with what the governor's office kind of directed, you know, the California State Workforce Board last year in 2023 through AB 361. They directed, create a workforce initiative. And honestly, it hasn't happened yet. It just hasn't happened yet. And so the folks that have been tasked with that through AB 361 are very interested in this work, and they don't want to lose. And they don't want to see this loss or this how should I say? They don't want it to see. They want to make sure they keep track of it. They want to make sure they keep track of what we're doing in the county. Now, you know, we could rename it to not have like a statewide advisory board, but it's not being created by the state. It's more about handpicking individuals from certain groups within Sacramento that are very enthusiastic and interested in staying connected with this. But also, I think it's important that we do have that connection with the state groups. You know, as we're developing these gaps and needs and work programs, you know, we're looking at, you know, ATU statewide would be part of that group, particularly even ATU International, the California Workforce Development Board, GoBiz, like all of those entities should be kind of part of this conversation as we're creating these more regional groups. And so maybe the name is misleading.
I think everything you just said is great and right. It is a new role for this agency to be doing what you just said.
Yeah.
And my only point is that it come back when it's finished to the board. So it's not just us saying, whatever
100%.
you do now, go off and do it and we'll approve it. It's
100%.
come back so we see what you've come up with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of paths there that you're going to go down that may not flourish.
Yeah.
Some you may go, wow, and I think the name is confusing to me.
Yeah.
It is confusing. My concern is, are LA people going to be on this board that
No.
we're going to deal? Well, then maybe in the next step, it's changing the name of this a little bit so that we're, but what an important goal this is. I just think this board deserves to see the final product.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we would plan to do that anyways.
But
I
the
think.
resolution, I'm thinking,
we-
at the full board, we need to have maybe
maybe
two
some
more
language.
words in there to
Yeah,
say,
that's
with
fine.
full board authority or whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. I think right now we're still populating the names in all of those roles right now, And I think to your point, Commissioner Fideli, like, we don't want to put a name in there that's going to get us sideways with one
Got me
area,
sideways.
you know,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And so-
that's right.
And so I think,
Let's define this,
so,
yeah.
yeah, so we can, as we're continuing to develop and define what this is, I mean, we can bring it back to the board, and that's no problem. So, and then I think, just as we're continuing to develop our goal, and we have time, but just in terms of timeline here, you know, hopefully what we would do is get the board's support this month. We start going out and seeking invitations, you know, to these people. And then once we can at least confirm some names that are be interested in participating, you know, we can flush some of those names out with the board via email if you'd like, you know, just as we're continuing to develop this, you know. And then if need be, we can bring it back to the board as it's fully structured.
Yes.
And you can see all the names and all the people and how it's gonna work. But the goal would be to like launch the first meeting of both groups at the Redefining Mobility Summit in April. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. So that's kind of a quick timeline. So yeah, we're not planning on doing this in a vacuum. We definitely want the board to continue to be involved
Well,
and the
it's
updates and direction.
Sort of protection for a board that is approving something that we don't really know how it ends up. And whether or not it's successful or not, we will have voted for it. So let's make sure that we
Yeah.
have our full participation. Yeah, thank
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I love how proactive, I love the big thinking. I love the, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And instead of waiting to be asked, we're you know, jumping on the task. And there's no better way to make sure that the right expertise and the right interested parties are at the table than to do the coordination ourselves. But to Paul's point, I think it would be two things that I would suggest. One is that, yes, it does come back to the board when this is fully baked and we know what this looks like, who's on it, what the funding and the staff time in particular. And two is that in the event, as we're planning, as you're going out there and actually making this happen, if there are any unforeseen major impediments, or if it looks like we're biting off more than we can chew, please bring it back to this committee and keep us posted.
I just want to add just a couple things too. I think there's a little bit more about why we're doing this, right? I think there's some questions about why we're doing this, and so you know, CCTA is leading in this autonomous vehicle space in the state. I mean, we were literally the only agency in the state that has these autonomous vehicles operating on public roads. You know, LA Metro's not doing it. RCTC's, all these other agencies are not. We're the only agency. And so, and because we're doing this, you know, one, we've had obviously a lot of successes. We've also started developing career paths around training bus drivers to be autonomous vehicle operators with the Martinez Main Mobility Project. And that has obviously garnered a lot of attention from labor, right? We got a resolution from Josh Anjar and the Operator Council, the
Labor Council.
Labor Council, thank you. The Labor Council kind of saying, hey, like, if you're going to continue doing this stuff, we want to make sure labor's involved, right? We want to make sure labor's involved. And so, and because we've gone to the state and because we have something here locally, what we have not found is an agency or a table, if you will, that has been created to really have those open conversations with labor, you know? And so knowing that, you know, first and last mile, autonomous shuttles, all of those things are a big part of like our future in Contra Costa County. We feel like it's kind of, we need to kind of take this on because it's really our direct response to that resolution. You know, when we sent a letter back, you know, to the Labor Council, we were saying that we want labor to be engaged. We want to work with labor, and we need to work with labor to identify what those opportunities are so we can start identifying those career paths so we can continue with this work, right? And so I think I feel like if the regional working group, I think, is key, really key. I think what we need to focus on, to your question, Commissioner Vela, is just more the statewide role and what it means. And so I think we can work on that and what the connection is and what the role is going to be. But I think this regional working group, I feel like we kind of, in some ways, we kind of have to do, just to address a lot of the labor concerns that we have in this county, particularly around glideways, the three AV projects, and also potentially future expansion and other projects. And so, I think all the comments are very well taken. I appreciate the feedback, and we'll bring this back and we'll see how we can incorporate it into the board presentation.
Thank you very much. And just one more point, I'm just wondering on the statewide idea of an advisory board, is on the list of potentials, is it going to a state legislator with labor support for Bill to do this? Is this not an option? I mean, let's make it real. Let's create this with an ally of ours in the state legislature, get labor support. Let's go testify in Sacramento and get it established. But for us to do it is what my concern is. Why are we out there doing this ourselves was my.
Yeah. I mean, we're not proposing to do that.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
you know.
but it's, again, I think we need to focus more on just the purpose of the group that we're trying to form and on the statewide front. And again, statewide's misleading, but I think we want to make sure that we have this advisory body from Sacramento, so that way we're creating that connection between what we're doing here in the county and what's also happening in Sacramento. I mean, that's really what we're doing with this advisory body is more just creating that connection to Sacramento. So we make sure that we do it in alignment with what's happening.
So it's more an informal group, you're saying, than a
very
formal
informal.
state? Okay.
Informal, not formal. It's very an informal advice. And really, these are invitations saying like, hey, CCTA formed this Innovation Alliance. We formed these two groups, and this is, maybe I can put it in more different terms. This is really no different than what we would be doing for like the Innovate 680 project. The Innovate 680 project, we formed this policy advisory committee that forms around elected officials. We identified this technical advisory committee. We went out, sent letters, and this is two bodies that are providing direction to our project, to our Innovate 680 project. And so that's what we're doing with this project is we have this Gomentum Innovation Alliance, and we need these groups to be filled in order to be able to help direct the work that we plan to do. So that way it's meaningful both to industry, labor, and Sacramento.
Okay. Paul, you good?
Good.
Neil?
I'm sort of listening. I think the titles were off. And we all read different things into things, even though that what's really important to understand is there is a huge gap. You have emerging technologies, and even our Innovate 680 that's a real project. We just got another huge grant for that. So we formed different groups, as Tim mentioned, to help advise and go along to make sure that there's checks and balances. But in sitting in some of the GoBiz meetings and the meetings here about where these emerging technologies are headed, there's no standards, there's no legislation. There's things against it, but those are just reactionary. They're not based on anything. That the gaps between how to take a technology that's new with a solution in mind, how do you then apply it, and what are the rules to do that? So I think our role, because we have been trying to look at those tools and how we can take advantage of those, because the fact is they're going to be implemented, and actually in Europe and other places they are. So how do we help inform that conversation to be able to create smart safeguards, good advice, and create the ways and the tools to make these things work together? So in that absence of the void, an advisory group is important. It's not statewide. It has nothing to do with the state. It's an advisory group that I think us as an agency, we're smart to be helping form that, get it set up, it kind of runs. It will then inform, it can be that group, because the state is looking for advisors, right? Tim and I both had calls, as you know, Paul, you're an expert in this, and the state legislature, the legislature's not writing it. They have hired smart people and their advisors and their consultants. They've been calling us because they want to know, how's this going to work? We've heard about this technology. What should we be doing about it? So it's clear that there's a void in that area. So I think the advisory group has that. And of course, it's got to involve labor, all of it. It's got to involve people who are in that business to be able to inform, what are they thinking? Why are they? What are the risks and all of that? So I think the value of why we need the advisory group is great. Selfishly, it's really good for our agency to have our hand on it in some way. I agree with all the budgeting things. I'd like to see as this thing goes forward, bring back a budget, source of money and everything. The whole board votes on that. And then we'll get our monitoring. But the fact is there is no question, this is a huge need for that. Even what we saw, even Bus on Shoulder project, there needs to be oversight over that. How you do that. Is that technology driven? Actually, it is. It can't work. It's not like a bus driver going like this and looking out the window. It's entirely dependent upon advanced technologies. And they're smart, instantaneous. You know, we heard it every couple of minutes. Every 1/10 of a second, it updates itself, so it gets quick. That's actually pretty slow. I know people that could fix that. But the point is so I think we need this. This is the right time. And I think we will be able to then influence future legislation in the space as these solutions comes up. And selfishly, I'd rather have us doing it because I think we're deeper and more immersed into what new technologies look like. And we have active projects. So we have a vested interest to see those projects get out there in the most thoughtful way that has all of those inputs and reasoning, driver safety, people safety, all of those things, because none of those standards are there. I mean, when you really look at it from moving things on our highways, as much as we think there's standards, there's not a lot of standards out there. You know, there's crash impact. There are a lot of things that we have found, I personally have found, in looking how vehicles are made, the things that aren't as sophisticated as we think they are. Other areas they are. But clearly in the space we're in, there are no standards. So I think it's a great idea. Let's send this out with the thought and I'd make the motion that the motion would be to indicate that we move forward with this, that the titling and everything should be rethought. A budget should come back to us as to how this is going to be funded, and and before it totally gets published, it should come back to the full board to be checked in.
All right, so your motion is to adopt the resolution, but with those amendments?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, is there a second?
I would second that.
Okay, before we take a vote, is there any public comment?
We do not have any public comment.
I do not see any raised hands. All right, could we have a roll call, Emily, please?
Commissioner Arnerich?
Aye.
Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nowak?
Yes?
Chair Sauce?
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
wonderful. Lindy, thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to
That-
seeing you back.
Yeah, seeing you back, that was a really good discussion. Thank you to my fellow committee members for that. All right, next item, correspondence and communications. There are none. Any commissioner comments? Seeing none, how about Tim or staff, anything to add?
I already talked about the mega grant, so I think that's all from us.
Okay, great. So we are adjourned till our next regular meeting, which is December 5th, 2024 at 8:30.